Hey guys, I'm Amira and welcome to Open Up. This is your communication podcast and I am your host, also known as the communication expert. I'm your podcast host, your life coach, and also a speaker. Each and every single week, I'm going to be bringing you conversations to help you level up the way that you communicate, whether that's with yourself or in your relationships. Through each conversation, you're going to leave with food for thought, skills that you didn't know you needed, and ways to develop your relationships. So join me here as you learn the lessons that you didn't get to learn at school. Pull up a seat and join us as we open up. Welcome back for today's podcast episode. No matter what you are doing, where you are joining me from. By the way, I really love hearing what you're doing when you're listening to an episode. It makes me feel like I'm part of your life. So please let me know. Am I keeping you company today on chores? Are you on your morning commute? Maybe you're in the gym. I don't know if you listen to a podcast in the gym. I actually am that person. I am. Whatever you are doing, maybe I'm on your TV screen. Is anyone watching my solo episodes on YouTube? Could you please leave a comment if you are? I would so appreciate that, okay? Because we leveled up. We've done this season differently, but it's also really new for me to film every solo. And I have to say, actually, by this point, I think I would say I'm enjoying it. Okay, today we have got an episode that I am recording because it has been highly requested. And I think as well, I spend a bit of time with my clients working this out with them to find a system and to find a process that works well for them. So I am going to today on this episode talk you through essentially my way, my process of doing this so that it feels supportive for you, so you can take away tools and implement it and hopefully plan and prioritize to an absolute T to get the best out of your time. So I know that I'm laughing because these are the comments I get a lot. So Amira, how do you fit so much in? Amira, you love being busy. Amira, like, you're so organized. Okay, so I am gonna self-proclaim I'm queen of organization. I have been for as long as I can physically remember, even as a little kid. And it is something that, yeah, I enjoy. If you've heard me talk about your 4 different zones, then I'm going to say it's my zone of excellence, not my zone of genius. If you don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry. I'm going to save it for another episode. So today I want to essentially give you a step-by-step process of how I plan, of how I prioritize on a yearly basis, a quarterly basis, a monthly basis, and even break it down to like a day/week by week. Okay, so I've got this I think I'm going to go through this in 3 sections for you today. We're going to look at priorities first of all, then we're actually going to look at planning, and then we're going to look at like your day-to-day or your imminent, which is your month by month or your week by week, okay? Now, a couple of things I want to say. Going into this episode, when you're thinking about planning, when you're thinking about your goals, when you're thinking about what you're going to achieve, and when I say this year, I mean in any 12-month period, okay? It is irrelevant when you are listening to this episode. It doesn't have to be at the beginning of a new year. You can implement a new system. You can prioritize whenever you want. And many of you will know that for me, my new year is well and truly April. That's like when Amira resurfaces, is fully energized from her hibernation season, and is ready to go again. So going into this as well, the other thing I want you to bear in mind is you can plan and you can prioritize and you can do it to an absolute T, and life will throw curveballs at you. And I see it with my clients as well. Like, we have goals. We're always going to have goals. We are going to also work intuitively and go with the flow of their sessions. But sometimes what you want to achieve and when you want to achieve it by won't always happen because life will throw things at you that you didn't expect. Now, this doesn't mean just go with the flow and don't worry and don't get intentional. Hopefully we all know the stats by now in terms of having goals, writing them down, how much more likely we are to achieve them. So I'm all about it. But I just think there's a way bigger conversation than goals. Everyone comes at it in terms of what do you want to achieve this year? Or what do you want to achieve this week or this month? Or what's the goal that we're working towards? But there is so much more to planning, prioritizing, being productive with your time, achieving what you want. Goals is purely one element of it. So, as I was saying, because I've really diverted there, that life will throw curveballs at you. It's okay if you kind of come off the wagon. I said that out loud and then I was like, when has Amira ever used the word wagon? I don't know. But I mean, come off track. That's all I give up. If you come off track, like, you are human and it is going to happen. And I think sometimes we think we've got this plan in place. We've prioritized, we've got all of our actions, we know what we're working towards. And then we have this expectation that it's going to go exactly as we planned. And you know by now, you know this, it's not going to. And part of being human is how you deal with the moments around that. So we are going to need a lot of compassion. And if you happen to be listening to my solo episodes this season, you know that I'm talking about your inner dialogue. You know I'm talking about that compassion, that kindness, that forgiveness that you have with yourself. So take all those tools, please, from our previous episodes and apply them into what is going to be a very, very practical podcast episode today. Okay, so first section, as I have said, let's get deep, or let's deep dive even, into priorities. We cannot plan without understanding what our priorities are. And sometimes we miss this piece, okay? I'm going to break it down so that you can literally do this as you are listening. Now, fun fact, the word priorities, or priority, actually is derived from a Latin word, and it actually means one. It doesn't mean many, but in the Western world, we say, what are your top 5 priorities? Well, actually, if we were being very true to the word, we would only have one. And I know you might say, Amira, that's unrealistic. Do you know the world that I operate in? Do you know how many things I have to juggle? So I promise you, you're going to walk away with your own bespoke, personalized plan after today's episode. So the first thing I want you to think about is actually checking in with yourself and understanding what are your priorities. You can't set goals and create actions if you don't know what is important to you and why it is important to you. Now, there is a beautiful book on this topic. It's one of my favorites. It's called Essentialism. It's by Greg, I want to say McCowan. I never really know if I pronounce the surname correctly, but amazing. He's done lots of podcast episodes. One of my faves is him being interviewed by Jay Shetty. And I love it because Essentialism, in his book, he really talks about focusing on one thing, even when you've got lots of different moving parts, because I know so many of you will say to me, Amira, that's the most unrealistic thing I've heard. You want me just to do one thing and expect like my to-do list to get done. But this comes down to priorities. And another thing that I'm going to expand on is like reprioritizing as things change. Maybe you're in different chapters of your life. Maybe life has thrown some curveballs at you. Maybe what you thought was important last month isn't important now. So they can shift and they can change. But the art of essentialism is understanding like what are you saying yes to and where are you saying no. So first thing before we plan, I want you to ask yourself, what are your priorities? What are the things that are important to you? Now, parts of my IG community, I love that everybody commits to this every single week. We like to set our priorities weekly together and I like to share. And really in a really similar vein and a similar vibe, I only ask for your one priority, like your non-negotiable for this week, what are you focusing on? And I think it allows us to be really intentional. Some weeks that's going to be resting. Some weeks that's going to be, God, I need more sleep. Sometimes it's going to be committing to the workouts even when you don't feel like it, or even when it's pitch black and it's 5 a.m. and it's -1. If you're not in London, lately it's been extremely cold and we are feeling like we're living in Alaska. Side note. So setting your priority and your non-negotiable, whether it's for the year, whether it's for the week, whether it's for the month, is really helpful because it allows you to stay on track. So definitely take some time out to think about what you want to say yes to and where do you want to say no to, but more on that in a second. I'm going to give you a few buckets of your life to think about this because I think it will help segregate it. If I just said to you what are your priorities in life, you'd be like, well, I need to do this, I need to do this, I need to do that. So let's look at it in different sections. First of all, I want you to think about your relationships, not your romantic ones. I want you to think about your family ones, your friendships, maybe even your work relationships. Then I want you to think about your priorities when it comes to your love life, aka your romantic relationships, whether you're dating, whether you're single. Then I want you to focus on health. So what does health mean to you? What are your priorities there? Then I want you to think about money, aka financials. It's coming up a lot as a hot topic with my clients at the moment. Your next category I want you to think about is career, aka work, aka business, whatever word resonates with you. Then we have fun. Yes, that's also my word of the year, but fun, hobbies, what lights you up, what feeds and nourishes your inner child. And then last but not least, we've also got your environment. So spaces you want to be in, people you want to be surrounded by. That's kind of what I mean when it comes to environment. So if it's helpful, use those as buckets and think about the things that are important to you in this chapter of your life. And to start with, just brain dump. Don't think about organizing your thoughts. Don't think about the order they need to be in. Just brain dump. So if, for example, let's take love life, romantic relationships, because as humans, at some point we want to feel loved, we want to have a connection. Doesn't mean everyone wants to be married and be super committed, but I'm just letting you know, love life, let's go down that hole. So if I ask you right now, what's your priorities when it comes to, I was smiling at the team and then it really puts me off. Okay, so if we're thinking about your love life and romantic relationships, what's a priority for you right now? It might not be, I want a full committed relationship. That's totally okay. Maybe it's, oh my God, it's the furthest thing from my mind. Leave me alone. Whatever it is, write it down. If multiple things are coming to your mind, write it down. Okay? This is just your brain dump. Don't judge your thoughts. Let them free flow. Once you've got them down on paper, then I want you to take a look at each bucket individually. So let's stick with romantic relationships in your love life and look at the things that have kind of come up for you that are important. Maybe it's things like not settling. Maybe it's dating people that are actually healthy for you. Maybe it's dating people that add value to your life. Whatever it is, what I want you to do is look at that section and I want you to pick one thing that's important for you. Just one, okay? If you really, really want, because I know someone's going to push me on this and be like, I can't just pick one, pick your top 3. And what I want you to do by the end of this exercise is you've got your different areas of your life. You'll have hopefully one priority or your top priority in each area. And then I want you to think about it and look at it as a whole. Because and this will make sense when we talk about the next section and really think about like planning on a yearly basis, a quarterly basis. I am a really big fan of honouring life in the seasons that you get and understanding that life ebbs and flows. So it doesn't mean that you can only focus on one area of your life at a time, but it might be that some areas of your life have different priorities depending on the season or the chapter that you're in or depending what year you're in. And Jay Shetty actually explains this so beautifully, and I'm going to include this as we move through this episode in terms of how do we look at the year ahead. But for now, when you're thinking about what's important to you and you've got these different buckets, it doesn't mean you have to make every single area of your life important right now. Some things will be consistent. I would probably say like career and work for me has always been a consistent in terms of how am I moving forward, but it's definitely taken a different shape, like year on year for sure. I mean, going employed to self-employed, most definitely probably has way more of a weight to it because I run my business now versus when I was in the corporate world. Like the needs and the priorities were different. So that's the first thing. So as much as you've got this brain dump, you've prioritized, it's supposed to be helpful. It's then up to you. Like what out of those buckets do you want to focus on? What are maybe your top 2, top 3? And it might be that for the next 12 months, or even the next 6 months, right? Put your own timeframes on this. That actually right now you're in a season where relationships on a romantic level aren't that important to you. That's okay. I remember actually before I met my partner, we were talking about this last night. And he said to me, what did you do before you met me? But I basically put myself on a ban, a self-imposed ban for 6 months where I was not dating, I wasn't going to talk to anybody, I wasn't going to entertain anybody, and I kept to it. And it's because before that I was entertaining a lot of rubbish. So my point is, at that point in my life, I was just like, it's just not that important to me. I had other things that were a priority. So it's an example of think about your priorities. What is important to you? Now, a question I have been asked in terms of when you're planning and thinking about your priorities is, well, how do I say no? And for me, when you're clearer on what's a priority for you for like the year ahead or in this season, I think you find it a lot easier to know what you want to say no to. That doesn't mean, if you're not used to saying no, that it will be easy. But remember, I'm all about difficult conversations. I'm all about like being able to navigate the difficult emotions that come with it. But I know, for example, when I first set up my business and we first launched, that was my priority. I don't think I had mental capacity for anything else. And I am very blessed to be surrounded by some incredible friendships and some very patient people who truly got it. And I would say that I think my friends can vouch for this, 0 to very little time into my friendships. Now, I'm not saying it was healthy and I'm not saying that it was good, but because of the zone I was in, launching the business and getting it off the ground and making it work, there was very little else in my life at the time that was priority to me. But shifting, if I look at this year, actually nurturing my friendships is a huge priority for me this year. And it also links into my word of the year, which is fun. But remembering as well that I find so much inspiration from my friends. I think they're all incredible people in very different ways for very different reasons. And I love being around them because sometimes it's as simple as them making me feel human and laughing. It's that simple. So coming back to that question of like, how do you say no? You have to know what's important to you. You have to know what's your priority at that chapter or that stage in your life. And you have to give yourself that permission. Remember, we said that grace around not having the perfect year, around your goalposts changing. You have to have that grace to be able to say, I maybe don't have the energy for that at this time. This doesn't mean that I can't be there for you. I don't want to be there for you. But right now, I can't show up in the way that perhaps you want me to, or in perhaps the way that you're used to. So saying no can be hard. There's no easy way to get around it. And especially if, I'm going to say, you're in your people pleasing phase where you want to keep everybody happy and you want to keep the peace. So it can be difficult. But when you get a lot clearer on what's important to you, what's your non-negotiable, you will know, for example, why you're prioritizing that workout over going out or going down to the pub. I had to just pick an example that was like super opposite to a workout. I hope that illustrates my point. So the last thing I want to leave you with to kind of wrap up this section of prioritizing and getting to know what your priorities are is, as busy people, as people that love to achieve and set their ambitions high, do not think for a second I am telling you to lower them. But I do want you to be very honest about, when are you taking on too much? When do you tip into overwhelm? Because actually, you forgot your priorities and actually you've just said yes to everything. So 3 questions to help you reflect. And at the end of last year, I created a completely free downloadable reflection guide. So I'm going to leave that in the notes as well, because even though it was to reflect on the past year and the end of 2023, you can use it to reflect at any stage of your life. So 3 questions I want you to think about when it comes to prioritizing and planning your time, your objectives, your vision for your life and how you want to live your life. First question is, what are your values? Now, I know I've been talking about that a lot as well, especially on my stories. Your values are so important because then you know why you're saying yes and what you're saying yes to. Does it align with your values? Now, I'm going to put a little caveat in here, although this is not a values podcast today. Sometimes you can step away from your values. Sometimes you can do things against your values. Like, it is okay. You just need to understand why have you made that decision. And if it gets super uncomfortable, how do you come back to your values so you're back in alignment? And when I say alignment, I get that's a very coach word. Sometimes I talk way too coachy. You have to tell me when I do. When I say alignment, I mean, are you embodying it? So one of my values, I think I'll probably use this one as an example all the time, but one of my values is freedom. Now, freedom to me doesn't mean necessarily getting up and traveling whenever I want. Freedom actually means choice to me, and it means having autonomy. So freedom means I get to choose my diary, I get to choose my clients, I get to choose who I work with, I get to choose when my busy seasons are, and that is super important to me. So if, for example, I was going to take on, let's say, a new project at work that was going to compromise that, where I wasn't going to have choice, I wasn't going to have autonomy, I probably wouldn't say yes to it. Or if I did say yes, I'd have to be super clear why I was saying yes to it and why I'd be willing to step away from that value. Just another quick example, because I always use freedom as an example for me. One of my other values is love. And by that, for me, I mean, I want to feel the love and joy in everything that I do. Is that true? No, not always. But I try and make authentic decisions from my heart that come from a space of love, because that's very, very unique for me. And I know that when I connect to that, I make my best decisions. So that's another example of one, why that's my value. And when I want you to reflect on like how you use your time, how you're prioritizing, what your values are incredibly important, because they are your compass. I know I sound like a broken record, but they are your compass, they are your North Star. They really help you guide your decisions. Okay, second question is, what do you want to do more of? So reflecting, thinking about your vision going forward, what do you want to do more of? I know I want more like play in my life. That sounded so weird the way I said that. I want more play. I don't want to reuse the word fun. I think my solo episodes so far, I think I've just overused the word fun in every solo episode. But I want more play. I want to really, really connect to like the younger version of me that was like super sporty, loved being outdoors, really, really active. That's what I want to do more of, as an example. Okay, question number 3 when you're reflecting before we get into the practical steps of planning is, what could you say no to? Or let's reframe that question. Where are you saying yes when you could be saying no? And that is an integral question when you're thinking about your priorities. Okay, so a little bit of a recap before we move on to planning. Priorities, you need to know what they are in order for you to plan and create the vision of the life that you want to have, okay? You don't need to be thinking about your life for the next 20 years unless you really, truly want to. You can just think about the next 12 months ahead, whatever feels good for you. Also, if it's helpful, do a brain dump, split your life into areas and brain dump what your priorities are. Then think about your top priority in each area of your life. And then think about the areas of your life that you are prioritizing at the moment. Doing it all, probably not going to be that helpful. Just a little bit of a tip. Okay, guys, we are at that part of the episode that you are waiting for. Let's get down to the nitty-gritty of planning. How do I stay so organized? How do I plan so effectively? This really sounds like I'm bigging myself up. And how do I really get the most out of my day, my week, my month? I do also want to say one of my other values is variety. So I enjoy doing multiple things at one point in time. If I only had one thing to concentrate on, I don't know if I would show up in the world in the way that I do, because it's what excites me. And I love my brain being stimulated in that way. Okay, so I want us to look at your year as a whole. Now, remember, if you listen to this episode in July, great. That's amazing timing. You're going to look at your next 12 months from wherever you are at when you're listening to this episode, okay? Please don't get into the new year hype. Unless you absolutely love it, great, okay? So I want you to look at your 12 months ahead. I want you to really, really start to think about, how do you want to feel over the next 12 months? And you guys do know that I'm about to contradict everything I've just said. At the beginning of a calendar year, I do set my word of the year. And last year, as an example, my word of the year was ease, but we'll come back to that in a second. So when you're setting your word of, when I say the year, I mean like the next 12 months, or you can even do it on like a 6-month basis. Like, what's your word for the next 6 months? How do you want to feel? What do you want to like bring in more of in your life? Now, usually I say your word of the year is the thing that you're not doing. It's not something that you are already bringing into your life or cultivating. As we all know by now, yes, my word of this year is fun. I don't know what that says about me, but no, on a very serious note, I know that a lot of my words over the last few years have been like super healing, looking inwards, growing, focusing, and I've become way too serious. And I've also like missed some small moments in life, and that's what my year is about. So it's most definitely the thing that's missing from my life. Last year, as an example, when I said ease was about knowing how to still achieve my goals and not constantly feel like I had to push, and allow like the good things in. That's what ease really, truly meant to me. So starting with looking ahead and planning, get very clear on how you want to feel. What is that word? What are you trying to embody? Because we are going to use that to then set your vision. Now, I was listening to my incredible Jay Shetty, and he shared something on one of his solo episodes that I want to tie into today because I think it's super helpful. He talks about going through different types of years and asking yourself, what's the year ahead for you? What does it look like? What do you want it to be focused on? And I'm actually going to read this, okay? Because there's different types. How many types did he say? He said 4 types of years that you can have. And I think when you're thinking about your next 12 months ahead and planning it and also understanding what your priorities are, it's a beautiful way of really, really nailing down and focusing on what you want to do, what you want to achieve, what you want to cultivate more of. And sometimes, as high achievers, we're trying to do it all, and we're trying to make sure that we're like exceeding what we did last year. I think I'm becoming less of a fan of like, let's make X year our best year yet. Why do we constantly have to be trying to like exceed what we previously did? Like, it's actually not that healthy for us to have that. That doesn't mean, please do not confuse that with me saying we aren't trying to grow or get better. But what I am saying is that growth can look very different year on year. Okay, back to Jay Shetty. The 4 years that he has described, number 1, a year of learning. So is this the year that you fine tune something, that you go and learn a skill? Maybe it's your year of courses. Maybe it's your year of being surrounded in a certain industry so you can cultivate the skills that you need to. That's very much a year of learning. Is it your year of experimenting? I love this because it's actually come up in a recent conversation with one of my clients, and we're in this phase where we are experimenting, and this is where we're really finding out what works for them, and it's exciting. I love an experimenting phase. But as Jay Shetty explains it, is this your year where you might have learned the year before? You might have all these skills, you might have all these tools, and now it's about experimenting and finding a way that it works for you. That could be in your romantic relationships, could be when you're dating, could be with your partner, could be at work, could be in a new career. Another type of year is a year of performance. So is this the year where you do? This is the year where maybe you're putting yourself out there. This is the year where perhaps you are really honing what you're doing because you've experimented and you know what works. And the last and final type of year is your year to thrive. This is when you shine in, and we worked so hard for that. However, I do want to say one thing Jay Shetty said on that episode, and one thing I want to caveat is, so Jay Shetty said that for some people, you can go through those different types of years all in like a 12-month period. It depends where you're at. And I also just wanted to add, it doesn't mean that they're all going to seamlessly follow each other. So remember, account for the curveballs that life happens. Okay, so once you are super clear on like how you want to feel, the next kind of 12 months you want to call in, and what are you focusing on, I think it's such a beautiful way to look at it in different types of years. And I know if I look at it from a business perspective, for sure, I've known, okay, I'm building my credibility. How am I doing that? Okay, I'm going to learn. I'm going to advocate. Okay, I'm going to spend the most time that I can with my one-to-one clients. And it's been such a helpful way of how I've looked and nourished that phase of my life. And knowing as well that sometimes I've needed to step back or be more inwards, and that's okay because it's not been my year of doing or my year of performing. Okay, so one of the exciting things that I know is like a hot topic, gets the most press, is creating your vision board. But before you nail it down to your vision board, I want you to think about your vision because that's way more important. Your vision board is the practical side of bringing that to life. So your vision needs to make you feel inspired. It's okay if it scares you a little bit. And sometimes I forget what I've put on my vision board or what I envisage in my life. And then it comes true. And I'm like, oh, yeah. Remember when you wanted that? Remember when that was like something you were super trying to create in your life? Now, I was also listening to an episode recently from Grace Beverly. And she said she's not really that type of person that necessarily manifests or journal. But you guys know by now that I am a very, very big believer that we're all manifesting already. Whether you think you're getting intentional about it or not, you're doing it. And you just might not realize how intentional you're being. And I think Grace Beverly is a great example because of how much she plans, how much she like sets her goals. She's constantly reviewing them. And that's very much her approach. So remember, manifesting it's the art of bringing into your life and creating the vision and making that a reality. But it's also doing it through taking action. And I personally think that manifesting gets such a bad rap because it's woo-woo or it's spiritual or it's just let's visualize this and it's going to happen. It's the combination of you can truly, I swear to God, especially if you have listened to my solo episodes for season 5, you will know what I've manifested recently. But I'm such a big believer that you truly can create the life you want, the relationships you want. Doesn't mean that it's not going to be hard to get there, but you also have to take action. And it's about how the two combine. Anyway, that was actually a very big side note. Okay, back to vision. Think about your vision for the foreseeable ahead, 6 months, 12 months. You want to go longer than that, go for it. And you've got your words, so you've really harnessed how you want to feel. And now creating that vision of like, who do you want to be? How do you want to show up? What do you want your relationships to look like? And your vision board is essentially your beautiful images that inspire you, that help you make it a reality. And a vision board is a beautiful way of using the tool of visualization. And so many athletes use visualization to make to reach the goal they want to reach, to perform in the way that they want to perform. And a key part of it and why it's talked about in manifesting, or when you're learning how to manifest, is it's because it's about embodying the person you want to be or the person with that outcome, which very much, guys, links back to my episode on habits. So I won't go into that now. So that's what visualizing is about. It's imagining that it's already happened. So if you want to win that race and you want to go through that finish line in a certain time, I don't know why I use that example, guys, because I don't know how many athletes are listening to this podcast, but I think I use it because my brother's a runner. Anyway, that's the example we're going with, okay? Then you have to embody that. You have to imagine finishing the finish line in the time that you want. And you can't just imagine it and not do the work or the training to back that up. But in visualizing it, embodying it, and knowing that it can be true for you is so incredibly important. And that is very much one part of how I manifested my dress for the wedding. Huge, huge part. Okay, so when it comes to creating your vision board, the last thing I want you to know in order to do this, because you're probably like, great, Amira, you want me to feel inspired. Where do I start? How am I going to go find these images? A practical thing that's more important in terms of how you're going to go get the images is how do you want to create the vision for your life? So I tend to actually look at my life in 3 pillars, which is really how I've built the business. I look at it as me personally, like who am I? How do I want to show up in the world? Then I think about my personal life. So my personal relationships, my romantic relationships, but also the things that bring me fun and joy and like where I want to live and where I want to travel. And then I look at my life in a professional sense. So who am I aspiring to be? What's the impact I want the business to have? So for me, I split my life up into 3 key areas. you might want to go back to the buckets we created for your priorities. And you might want to look at it in terms of your money and your financials. You might want to look at it in terms of your family and friendships. Then you might want to look at your love life. You might want to look at your career, your business, and then health, your fun, and your environment. So again, pick what works for you, please. There is no like right way. There's no you must do it this way. And then, as I've said, create your vision board. It's supposed to inspire you. I'm really visual, so I'm always going to use images. If that doesn't work for you, I have heard people create their vision board by like sticky notes and writing things down. I always say it's the way that your brain processes information. So lean in and do what's good for you. Okay, so now that you are so crystal clear on what your priorities are, you understand your vision, you've created that and brought it to life and really separated the areas of your life in a way that works for you, this is where your goals then come in. So your goals are literally your outcome. That's what you're working towards. I say your end result, but I mean your end result in that chapter of your life for whatever that is. Maybe your end result is right now to start dating again. Maybe your end result is to get out of an unhealthy relationship. I think the theme of Valentine's is rubbing off on me today because all I've done is talk about romantic relationships. So this is where you create your goals. And again, create your goals according to the different areas of your life that work for you. So again, I have my personal goals, I have my professional goals, and then I have the things about me that are way more like self-development, right? And how I want to be as a human being. Again, if it works, thinking about your financials, your career separately, do that. Now, a couple of things I want to say about goals, maybe 2 or 3 things. First of all, I'm going to be a little controversial. So yes, SMART goals work. I think I've advocated for them for so long, especially coming from a corporate background. For me, having a deadline on my personal goals doesn't make me actually achieve it quicker, and it doesn't hold me accountable. But I'm also the type of person that is already highly accountable to myself. So I don't have a problem in that area. So again, if what I'm saying sounds like so alien to you, then create a time frame on it. Now, for my business, I do have timeframes on those goals, loose ones. They're not rigid, right? I will have deadlines for stuff, most definitely, in terms of, let's use the podcast as an example, how many seasons I want to produce in a certain time frame. And then we're going to have goals in terms of how we're going to achieve that. And we're going to have deadlines or timeframes around that. So in some areas of life, I'm a lot more specific. If it comes to me, then definitely a lot more relaxed. Now, 2 other things I want to say about goals. One, you've got a whole other episode on what I'm about to say. The piece that we are missing when it comes to goals is your habits. Okay, your goal is just your outcome. Let's say I want to produce 100 episodes this year. Just imagine. I'm pretty sure that's not my target. I have to think about what are the habits that are going to make that happen. Maybe it's research around upskilling, being a better interviewer. Maybe it's researching my topics. Maybe it's making sure that I record an episode a week so that I'm in the flow and I practice. Like, they're the habits that are going to help me achieve that in a way that's really helpful. And it might be, for example, if I was going to make that a super specific and measurable goal, to produce 100 podcast episodes this year, half solo, half with a guest, and to ensure that they get X amount of downloads. That's a very, very tangible goal if you want to set it in that way. Okay. So habits is a really important part of how you're going to achieve those goals. Whole episode on it. Go and check it out. I'll link it in the show notes. Now, the other piece I want to say around your goals before I move into like my day-to-day and how I manage it is you cannot just set your goals and never ever review them. And I do this consistently on my Instagram and kind of encourage you guys to like go on the journey with me month on month. I usually at the end of a month will reflect on what that month looked like. What did I set as objectives for that month? Why did things perhaps not go the way I wanted to? What the lessons am I taking out of that month? And then look forward for the month ahead based on the lessons that I've just learned. And whilst that might sound like a lot, it doesn't actually have to be a really big activity, but you do need time in your month, most definitely, to reflect before you move forward. Because if you're not reviewing what didn't work, you're going to get to a certain point where you're constantly feeling like you're not achieving your goals. Okay, so last but not least, I am going to talk about batching my time, how I look at it, take it from a big kind of umbrella view that we've talked about, and how I dumb it down. That's not the word I'm looking for, but how I translate that's what I'm looking for, how I translate that on a micro level. So going macro to micro, what do I do on a day-to-day basis? Okay, so and this is very much as well, I guess, when I look at my business more than anything, will have my vision for the year, and then I split things into quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, and quarter 4. Okay, so what is the focus for each of those quarters? Then I create the goals within each quarter, so I will know, example, April to June, I'm looking to achieve XYZ. These are the habits I've got to embody in order to get to that. And then I break it down month by month. Okay, so if I want to, for example, reach 10,000 downloads for the podcast within that period, okay, month by month, this means we want to be hitting this target. But how do I think, or what do I think I need to do in order to get to that target for the end of every month? So we take a quarterly view, then we drill it down, and we actually take a monthly view, knowing the bigger things that we're working towards. And then, of course, we drill it down and we look at it as a weekly level. Now, a couple of things I'll say about how I manage my week. So I go back to my non-negotiable and my priority. What is the priority for that week? How does that then feed into the overall goal for the month? And how is that feeding into the bigger goal for the quarter? Now, in terms of how I use my time, I batch my time like no man's business. I also try and have separate days for separate things that I do, because my brain works the best in that way, especially because I have lots of moving parts and lots of balls being juggled. So I will try and have one day as my client day, or a couple of days as my clients. A couple of days I'm working with companies. One day might be a podcast, and another day could be more behind the scenes or an admin day. But I batch my task, and it doesn't mean the whole day will always be the same thing. And it allows me to have buckets of my time that are super focused and super effective. And then getting to the end of the week, I will know what's been achieved, what hasn't, what do I maybe need to reprioritize, and why. So I feel like I could actually probably go on and explain this in so much detail, so much more detail. But I think I've probably packed this episode with so much already. So I'm going to leave it there. Remember, you got your overview, you've got your priorities, you've got how you're going to plan your vision, and then what you're going to do on a micro level when it comes to your goals, when it comes to your habits, and also managing your time on a weekly basis. Now, if you want any more detail, if you think it's helpful for me to actually go through and explain what a week looks like for me and how I manage that, let me know, and we can always do another episode on that. Guys, thanks for joining us for another conversation this week. You know the deal by now, so please hit subscribe, leave a review. Don't forget to share this with a friend. And if you want to come and hang out with me, then click Instagram. You'll find me at _communication expert.